Okay, so years ago, my dad purchased a cemetery when I was in middle school, and I worked for him through high school graduation. I did yard work, mowing, weeding, tended to flower beds, etc. And aside from the occasional shadows seen out of the corner of my eye or hearing strange sounds, the cemetery was actually quite a peaceful little place. But the strangest is when you have a burial in the crypts. Basically, you dig down about 5 or 6 feet to expose a giant pair of stone slab doors. You pull the stone doors off and then drop down into a tiny, cold, dark room. These rooms can either fit 2 full-sizes coffins, for children's coffins, by far the hardest to deal with, or years and years worth of cremated remains. So back in the 50s and 60s, families would purchase one crypt and the entire family tree would be cremated and interred inside it. Some just put the cremated remains in it and closed it up, but others light candles and leave mementos, flowers and souvenirs, pictures, things like that. It's really creepy opening up one of those things up after like 50 plus years and finding all kinds of melted candles and old pictures of the deceased people inside. Not only that, but when you hop down in there enough times, eventually you have a weird realization that you are at the same level and completely surrounded by bodies. And that one day, inevitably, you're going to be joining them. Another time, my best friend and I were earning a little money over summer at the cemetery, working as groundskeepers when we were juniors and seniors. It was easy money. We got paid $5 an hour, mostly for edging or trimming and generally keeping the whole place nice and tidy. We raked a lot of leaves and dug a lot of holes that summer. But we also got to tear around the grounds in what was basically a souped-up golf cart with our tools in the back. There were a lot of dead flowers to dig up, not to mention a lot of empty liquor bottles, beer cans and unfortunately, on occasion, even some used condoms. There was a widow who left scribbled notes on her husband's grave, almost all of them completely illegible. Also a lot of sodden stuffed animals left on the graves of children. It felt wrong throwing that stuff in the trash, and take my word on it that it sucked even harder than digging holes. It was annoying to work in the rain, and it rained often, but it was truly a gravy job. No pun intended. The creepiest thing I saw was one of old-style baby dolls that had been left on a grave. Not inherently creepy, I know, but what creeped us out is the fact that it was badly burned. Almost like someone had gone over it with a blowtorch or something. Not just that either, it had what we discovered to be these big, iron nails that had been driven into the spaces its eyes should have been. Probably just some local college kids playing a prank or something. Hell, I could have been my buddy, but he never admitted to it. It just really creeped me out to see that thing one early morning, when there wasn't another soul in sight. Having said that, there was something far, far worse I encountered while doing that job. It was the naked corpse of a young woman my age, left neatly with her arms at her sides one foggy Saturday morning. She had been strangled right there. Whoever murdered her had also bludgeoned her horribly. She was identified quickly. It turned out she was a student at a neighboring high school, but her clothes were never found and, to my knowledge, her murder never ever solved. My friend and I were grilled by the police on 2 separate occasions, and honestly, I think that was the scariest part, knowing we were actually implicated in the murder. But we didn't know a thing, and each had allies, so eventually we were ruled out, and the cops didn't bother us anymore. Former funeral director here. A bit of setup first. The cemetery I run is a real old, like by a good few hundred years. At least, it must be, since the church next to it was constructed during the 17th century. Considering the fact that it is a pretty rural place as well, most people back in the day were buried with only wooden crosses and such, no stone or marble. So as time goes on, crosses rot and wither away, new people get buried, etc. Nowadays, due to less people living out here in the sticks, which means our budget is increasingly limited, the cemetery is really run down and overgrown. It is a really pretty place, and it's honestly pretty depressing. So, as some of you can imagine, when you keep burying bodies in the same small patch of dirty for that many centuries, eventually the soil has been worked over dozens and dozens of times. So in the end, it consists mainly of bone meal. You can't even rake over the flower beds there without accidentally uncovering some teeth or finger bones or something equally grim. It's nothing but fragmented skeletons all the way down under the thin turf. The soil sort of resembles the kind of dirt you see near sandy beaches, except on closer examination all the light-colored parts are just bone fragments rather than crushed seashells. Not really scary or unexpected, just super goddamn eerie until you eventually get used to it. You learn to treat anything recognizable as human remains with respect, and just tuck it away out of sight under the plant or whatever else you were putting there. Anyway, so someone was taking care of their relative's grave and decided to expand the area around the grave. For some reason the people around here are not particularly fond of grass, rather preferring a well-leveled ground with Zen garden lines made with a rake. The person removed the grass, and was sprucing up the place up with a rake when they pulled up a bunch of snow-white hair from the dirt. They must have just freaked out and ran out of there, leaving the cemetery attendant to stumble across what is essentially hair coming out of the ground. She reported it to the church and supposedly they reburied the remains. Even with all my years as an undertaker, I'm not entirely sure how there could have been a body so close to the surface, but there's another incident that sticks with me even more than that one. My business partner and I had just gotten back to the funeral home from a house call for a 27-year-old woman who tragically passed away due to terminal cancer. As we were moving her body from the cot to embalming table, we heard an audible click and the radio across the room turned on full volume of static. It's one of those old radios you turn the volume dial until it clicks to turn it on. We both looked at each other, pale as ghosts. He happened to be an extremely religious man, and this event visibly shook him. He found an excuse to leave early not long after the incident. Anyway, I shut the radio off as I typically use my iPhone to listen to music while doing embalming work. When I'd finished the procedure and was attempting to move her from the embalming table to a dressing table, I heard that click from that old radio and it turned on full volume yet again. At that point I was fairly freaked out and got out of there not long after. My partner and I never spoke of it again, and nothing like that ever occurred to my knowledge before or after. This is a short story, but still I feel I need to get out there. My friend is out of town, so I am taking care of her pups. I was driving to her house yesterday when something odd happened. I went the back way, which I almost never take going to her house, only coming from it. It's a long, winding road with almost nothing but trees, a few houses here and there, and a very old cemetery. Now, usually when I drive through or pass by a cemetery I mute my music. It just feels disrespectful not to. Since I don't usually take this road in this direction, I didn't realize I was already passing the cemetery. Suddenly I was hit with this feeling of absolute dread. Almost as if I could sense something terrible was about to happen. Like when someone tells you we need to talk and you know it's something bad. Only this feeling overwhelmed me. I felt it deep in my chest. Just pure despair. I muted my music and was actually about to pull over on the side of the road to calm down when suddenly the feeling went away. Just as soon as it had come, it went. I felt perfectly fine, besides a little confused. Not sure what else to do, I kept driving, with my music still muted. As I drove I saw a family gathered for a burial rite on the edge of the cemetery. After I took care of my friend's dogs I drove past the cemetery again, my music muted of course. I didn't get any strange feeling this time. I haven't had a strange feeling passing by this cemetery before. Later, at work, I told a couple of my coworkers what happened. One of them joked that it might have been a spirit telling me to mute my music as not to disturb the mourning family at the burial. I laughed her off, but in all honesty I can't help but wonder if she was right. I have to drive past that cemetery again today, and anytime I visit my friend, I will always make sure to have my music muted.